Good afternoon, everybody. This week we lost a comedian who's been a hero of mine. Norm Mcdonald unfortunately passed away of cancer, and in my opinion, he was one of the greatest storytellers. I mean, there's all kinds of comedians, the situational guys. Um, there's the rude comics. There are the blue guys that tell really dark jokes. There's the guys who rely on using curse words and profanities, and then you have guys like Norm who they've really perfected telling stories, and they take you on what's called a shaggy dog story, where they'll run you around, and then there'll be a payoff at the end, and hopefully the payoff is worth it at the end. Um, anyway, ever since he was on Saturday Night Live, Norm, with his dry humor, was one of my favorites. And today, I wanted to share one of my favorite Norm Mcdonald stories as an homage to him. And I only hope that I can bring a smile to you guys that he brought to me. Definitely not nearly as good as he is and never will be. But anyway, I just wanted to give a little background to today's story. That this is definitely not one of my stories. This is a Norm Mcdonald story that he told very well, and you could hear it on when he told Howard Stern or Conan O'Brien even. So anyway, here's my homage to Fly. Here's my homage to Norm Mcdonald. Rest in peace. Thank you for everything. So I got a little Dirty Johnny story for you. Don't worry, it's not dirty. One day, little Dirty Johnny sitting in the back of the classroom, and his teacher, she's preparing for the day, and she starts her day off with, class, I'd like for you to tell me a story from your life, and then after you tell a story, I'd like for you to tell me what the moral of that story would be. Who would like to go first? So this girl at the front of the class, little Becky, she raises her hand. The teacher says, "Becky, you got a story you'd like to share with the class?" She says, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, I do. My dad, he works at the hatchery, and he takes the eggs from the hatchery down to the market and sells them. So one day, there wasn't very many eggs. There was only about 15 or so. And he got all the eggs into one basket. And after he put the basket in the cart, and he went down to the market, and as you guys know, the road was uneven, and the eggs all broke. And so that's the story. And the teacher's like, okay, well that's a good story, I guess. What's the moral of the story? And little Becky says, the moral of the story is don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's great. That's great. And the teacher, she's like, okay, they're getting it. They're finally starting to figure this stuff out. And then anybody else have a story they like to share? And then another little girl, she raises her hand and she says, I got a story. So the teacher's like, okay, you go ahead, little Marjorie. Marjorie, go ahead with your story. So Marjorie stands up and then she says, well, my dad also works at the hatchery. Thank God for the hatchery. This whole town thrives off that hatchery. And my dad, he takes the chickens. Some of the chickens, they let the eggs go until they become chickens, and then he takes the chickens down and he sells them at the market. Well, one day he had 9 chickens and he had 4 eggs, and so he called down to the market to let them know that he had 13 chickens that he was going to sell. So he loads up the chickens and he gets the eggs, and on his way down the road, as you guys know, it's an uneven road, all the eggs broke. And when he got to the market, he got in trouble. He only had 9 chickens when he told him he had 13. So the teacher says, well, what's the moral of the story? And she says, well, the moral of the story is you don't sell or you don't count your chickens till they hatch. That's great. That's great. And the teacher, she's feeling very proud of herself. And she's she's getting through to these kids. They're starting to think, they're starting to understand the lesson. And all of a sudden at the back of the classroom, I got one. It's little Dirty Johnny, and teacher, she knows, like little Dirty Johnny stories don't ever go very well. I can't call on him, but by God, he is a student and he has a story. All right, little Dirty Johnny, let's hear your story. So little Dirty Johnny stands up. He says, well, I have an Uncle Terry. And Uncle Terry, he's not very well liked in my household. He's not well liked in this town. He doesn't like anybody in this town. He thinks the hatchery's baloney. And he's on disability, so he doesn't have a job. And he's on disability because of what happened to him in the war. And when he was over there in Vietnam, apparently nobody in his platoon liked him either. And one day when Uncle Terry woke up, the platoon had ditched him. They left him. They left him there to die. They left him with 3 bottles of whiskey, his sidearm, a Kalashnikov, and a lot of ammo. So when Uncle Terry woke up and he realized that he had been left behind for dead, basically, he was very upset. Very upset. I mean, he's already an angry guy, but he was very upset. So Uncle Terry took and he drank a whole bottle of whiskey. And feeling pretty good, he grabbed himself the other 2 bottles, and he grabbed his sidearm, and he grabbed that Kalashnikov, and he headed down to the nearest village that they'd been sent to protect. And as he's walking up to the village, he sees all these villagers coming out of their huts, heading towards him. Uncle Terry doesn't know if they're friendlies, the ones he's supposed to protect. He doesn't know if they're Charlie. He doesn't know what's going on. All he knows is he's very angry. And he pulls that Kalashnikov out. And he decides he's going to let loose. If he's going to go out, he's going out fighting. And he just starts mowing people down. And he's got that Kalashnikov going to the point where he's like a farmer with a scythe in a field, just chopping wheat down. And first all the men go down, then all the women go down. And by God, he got all the children too. And when it was all said and done, he's standing there in all the mud and the guts and the blood. And he's just amazed at what he just did. And as his hands go down, he reaches into his pocket and he realizes his pants are wet. And all of a sudden, he feels this sense of shame. Shame because he wet himself. He pissed himself. He can't believe he did that. And as he brings his hand up and he smells his hand, and it's not piss. He reaches down again and he's feeling around, and that's ejaculate. He just went ahead and he turned his shame into a sense of glory again over what he just did, this craziness. And the teacher's like, Johnny, you got to stop. Johnny, what kind of story are you telling? How could there possibly be a moral to this story? And little Dirty Johnny says, oh, there is a moral to the story. The teacher says, well, what's the moral of the story then? This is disturbing. The moral of the story is, teacher, when Uncle Terry's drinking, you don't fuck with him. Ha ha.